Hello there my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make a basic Viking knit, and I'm going to show you how to do it using a homemade. So if you want to learn how you can make Viking knit, then keep watching. Now then, of course we need our wire, so I'm using a regular round silver coated copper wire in a 0.4mm gauge. And then we also need a few tools. Now I'm using these flush cutters here so we can cut our wire, of course. I like to have my tweezers and those pliers handy in case I need to manipulate the wire. And then I also recommend having something like an awl, which is basically a tool with a pointed tip, and this can help you open up spaces in your Viking weave where it's a bit tight so you can get your wire through more easily. Now we also need some draw plates, which can be made from different materials. In this case here, it's a piece of plastic with different size holes in them, but you could also easily make your own with a piece of wood and drilling some different size holes in it. And most importantly, we also need the tool we're going to make the Viking knit on. So in this case, I'm using a homemade tool where I just use some wire, tape, and in this case, a thick crochet. I do have a video where I show how you can make your own tool. I'm going to leave a link to that in the description box down below, along with useful links. Otherwise, let's get it all ready and let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is cut a length of our wire. So it doesn't really matter how long you cut it. It's really whatever you're comfortable working with. I usually just take my wingspan, so stretch out both my arms and cut that length of wire. That way it's manageable, but it's also a decent length because we can keep adding new wire into it. But I'm going to start with the wire towards one end here, and then I'm going to grab my tool, and then we need to first of all attach this end through one of the loops here in the tool. So what I'm going to do is take the end and put it through a loop, and I just like to go from behind the loop and have it come out towards the front, and then I'm just going to have a little tail there that I'm going to bend downwards and just put my thumb on that so I'm holding on to it. And then from here we're now in position so we can start the actual Viking knit. So I'm going to take the long length of wire here and bring it downwards and around towards the other side, so in this case here towards the right. So you can see we're kind of creating another little loop there that's hooked into the one in the tool, and just keep holding on to that tail. And then from there I'm going to get all the way to the end of my wire, and then I'm going to go through the next loop. Now I'm going through from front to back and from right to left here, and then I'm going to pull it all the way nice and gentle while still holding on to that little end for now because we don't want it to pull out. But then as I've almost pulled it tight, what I'm going to do is put my finger over the loops and then just pull it tighter, but not to the point where it starts to pull the loops there close together. We want to keep our distance between them as even as possible. But then you can see I've taken the wire and looped it through the next loop in the tool, and they are now connected together but with a curve coming downwards. And basically I want to continue like this. I've used up 2 loops in the tool there at the top. Get all the way back to the end of your wire and then rotate your tool, go to the next loop here and go through from the front to the back, come out towards the left there, and then you just want to make sure that the end comes over the top of itself. Pull the wire all the way through, and as I get to the point where it's almost tight, I just like to put my finger over it, so just to make sure they stay in the position I want them to. As I'm pulling this tighter, and you can see, same principle, I've then created a loop that then attaches to the loop from the tool, and we're working our way around and creating these almost little bridges between the loops. Grab the end of your wire again, go to the next loop in the tool, come through from the front to the back, from right to left in this case. You can obviously also work the other way if that's more comfortable for you. But then again, make sure the end goes over the top of itself, and then pull the wire all the way through, and just make sure we keep the distance between the loops so it looks a little something like that. And you just want to keep going like this all the way around until we get back to the very beginning one. And then as you can see, I've reached back to the very first loop where we started out, and we're just missing that very last bridge to kind of close the gap. So I'm going to take the end of the wire, and what we're going to do now is go behind that very first loop that we made. So literally come behind the wire, so between the wire and in this case my crochet hook, and you then just want to pull that all the way through. Again, make sure it come out over the top of itself. And then as we tighten this, just make sure it also goes over the top of that little tail that we left, so it doesn't tighten underneath it accidentally, because we want this little tail to be hidden inside of the Viking knit when we're done. So again, just pull that tight, and then we've closed up that gap, and we've now technically also started the second row of loops that we're going to do, because we're now going to keep repeating this. So this was just the beginning where we started out the knit, but now we get to the actual proper pattern. So from here I'm moving from this very first loop in this next row. So you literally take the end and come right behind the next loop. Make sure it comes out the other side of the loop, and again go over the top of itself. And we then just pull that tighter, and then as you pull that tight, you can see we're going to have 2 little bridges, you could call them, and you just want to make sure that they also stay fairly even throughout. So we're going to keep building these bridges underneath each other and have the knit grow more and more. So again, the next one, I go all the way behind the loop, come out the other side of it, over the top of itself. And then I just kind of like to use the bridge right above where we are as a guide to how tight I need to pull this new one. So I can see it's pulling tight and then laying nicely underneath the bridge that's on top of it. And just keep going, go behind the next loop, pull it tighter, and we're creating a new little bridge. So this is basically now all there is to it. You want to keep going like this, go behind the loop, pull it tighter, and try and get your spacing as even as possible. Now it does not have to be perfect because that will get fixed, but just get it as even as you possibly can. Both the distance between the loops sideways, but also between the bridges there. But like I said, don't worry too much about it, just do the best you can. Go behind the last loop, and then we're going to be back towards the beginning of this row. And then just to show you how to continue, it's the exact same thing, but obviously now we have more loops. So what you want to keep doing is go behind the previous loop. So that doesn't mean the very first one where we attached it, but the one from the previous row. So basically the very bottom one. And this could also be where you might find it a little bit more difficult to get through. And I find that is usually where the tails are when we're going to add a new wire. So that is where the awl comes in. You can take the very pointed tip and basically put that in where you want the wire to go. And it just helps open up the space so we can then grab the end of the wire and be able to put it through. Now what you want to make sure here is that you're coming behind that very bottom loop on this row, and we're going basically between those two little bridges on the right side and then coming out above the bottom bridge on the left. So we're literally bringing it behind just that single loop, the very bottom one. And again, make sure we're pulling this wire tight above the tail, so we don't want it to get caught underneath it. And you can see pulling it tighter, and we'll create another little bridge underneath the previous one. Moving to the next one, same principle, go behind the bottom loop, pull the wire all the way through until it's almost all the way tight, and then just get it into the position that we want. So you can see now on this row here, we're creating the third little bridge. And you just want to keep going like this, working your way around continuously and just focusing on that very bottom loop to come behind with the wire. And like I said, in this case, I'm working right to left, but you can easily do the same, working left to right and just using the same techniques. It does not matter. It's whatever's most comfortable for you. So you just keep going like this. So I'm going to do a little bit more of the knit here, and then I'll show you how it looks a bit further on. So now I'm a bit further on, you can see how it looks, and by continuously making loops underneath each other, it creates these rows going downwards and kind of connected by these little bridges going across. So like I mentioned, you just want to aim for having them as even as possible, so the distance between the loops and also the distance between the little bridges. Now it doesn't have to be perfect, but just do it as even as you can. Now what I also find helps is sometimes your rows of loops here start to migrate a little bit, so some of them will start to become a bit closer and then open a bigger gap between some of the other ones. So I find that using some tweezers nose pliers or chain nose, whatever you have, to help along the way can help counteract that. So if I feel like two rows are getting a bit further apart here, you can then start to push the ones that are getting a bit further apart just a little bit towards each other to help close it up wherever you feel like you need to, and that can just help even it out a little bit. Now obviously you don't want to push too much, just gently, and that can help straighten out the row again. So there's just a little tip to help make it more even. Otherwise you just want to continue. So just to show you again, I'm taking the end of my wire, I've still got a decent length left, and this is the last loop that I made. Go to the very next one, go literally behind the very bottom loop. So I'm going in between the two bottom bridges and coming out between the other two bottom bridges on the other side of the loop. So I'm just catching behind that, pulling the wire through, and then just pulling it, so we're creating that new bridge underneath the previous one, and just continue it, go behind the next loop. And you then actually start to build up the knit here pretty fast, and you can see it keeps growing downwards on your rod, and you can see it keeps growing downwards on your mandrel that you're using. So as you can see here, I've gotten further with my weave, and I've got to the point where, because I'm using a crochet hook, I've reached the handle part, which obviously is getting wider, so it no longer has that same smooth round shape. But there's not really a problem, because whatever you're using as a mandrel doesn't have to be very long, because what we can do if we run into that is just kind of loosen up the tape there and then push the knit further up the mandrel like that, and it holds its shape, so the knit doesn't come undone just because there isn't that cord to it anymore. But you can then see we now have this whole space to work with again, so the length of the mandrel you're working on does not limit how long you can make the knit. So I've just pushed it up. Then you just want to continue making the little bridges between the loops there, and I can work my way all the way back down to the handle again, and push it up again and make however long I want to. Now at one point you'll probably want to add in more wire, because as you can see here, I'm getting towards the end of it. So there's not a whole lot of wire left to work with. I'm just going to use up the end. And then first of all, we need to finish off this end here before we add in a new wire. So I'm going to go behind the loop like I've done previously, but instead of going behind the loop and out on the other side in the same place, I'm going to come down right out at the bottom there. So I'm kind of going out underneath that bridge on the other side instead of coming out between the two bottom ones. And then I'm also going to, in this case, I'm just using tweezers nose pliers to be able to grab the end, go underneath the wire of itself and then pull it out underneath there. And then I'm pulling it tighter. So we're still getting the look of a loop there. It's kind of half of the loop that we're making. And then we have the very end just coming straight down and basically just laying right on top of the mandrel here, but underneath the wire that we're using for the loops and the bridges. So now that's in place, I'm going to grab my next length of wire that I've already cut ready. Again, just use whatever length you're comfortable working with. And then I want to attach this end right on the loop that we just finished off the other end with. So on the left side here, I'm going to take the very end of the wire and go through the gap between the second and the third bridge from the bottom, and then basically come behind that loop that we were going to go behind before, but instead we went down. And then what we want to do is get this wire to come out underneath the bridge on the other side here, the bottom one. Now you might find that to be a bit tricky because there's not much of a gap there. So this is also where I'd like to take my awl, and then on the other side here, on the right side, where I want the wire to come out, I'm going to just put my awl underneath that bottom bridge and just create a bit of a gap so that hopefully when I put this wire through again, it's going to then come out below that bottom bridge, which is exactly what it's doing. So just to repeat, I'm going from left to right and I'm coming down between the second and third bridge there, behind the loop, and then down underneath the bottom bridge on the other side. And then again, this is just going to come down straight next to the other one. Now I'm then just going to take my thumb, hold on to that so it stays in place, and then basically we just want to pick up the weave again and do the exact same thing. So I'm taking the length of wire, bringing it around the bottom there, and basically we've just created the other half of the loop, so you can see it all blends in nicely. And I'm taking the end of the wire there and then just picking back up the same weave, so going behind the bottom loop on the next row and then just pull that tighter, and we have basically now attached the wire, and I don't need to hold on to that end anymore because it's already fastened in place. And then we just pull the wire tight again, create the next bridge to reach the next loop, and we literally just continue. So that is how you finish off the end of your wire that you're using and then add in a new one, and then we can just literally continue. And again, you can keep adding in wire like this and make it however long you need to. And then we're back to the point where we added in the wire, and I take the end then, and again I go behind the loop, but I'm going on top of the little tails there. That way I make sure that they're going to be right on the inside of the Viking knit, so basically within all of them, and we're not going to risk any of them sticking out or anything. And they're going to be less visible as well. Now, if you do find that this can be a little bit difficult because the tails there can cause this to be a bit tighter, this one thankfully I could easily go through, but if it is too tight, you just take your awl and bring that through the path you want the wire to go through first of all. That opens up the gap, and then you can just bring your wire through more easily. And then of course, as you're tightening this, make sure the wire goes over the top of the tails there so they don't get caught underneath. And what you can do, if you feel that these tails are a bit long, you can always cut them down and make them shorter, because they really do not need to be very long. And you just keep going around as if the tails weren't really there, and you then now know how to add in a new length of wire. So just keep going like this until you have the length that you want. When you're then done with your weave, then we can just remove it from the mandrel here, and you have your Viking knit. Now this is what it looks like straight off the mandrel, but we obviously need to work a little bit further with this, and that is where the draw plate then comes in. But before we can use that, we just need to finish off the end here. So I'm just going to take my flush cutters and go in and cut the initial tool that we made off. So I'm not cutting the loops in the knit here, I'm cutting the loops in the tool that we made, and then we can just remove it, and we have our length here. Now what we need to do is, with the same wire, I'm cutting 3 separate lengths of that wire here, just about 15 centimeters or so. Now what we then need to do is catch the very first loops that we made. So I'm going through one loop from the outside, and then I'm going to go straight across to the very opposite loop and through that as well. So this length of wire is going straight through both of them. Then get it to the midpoint of the wire and push the 2 ends upwards. Move to the next 2 loops that are straight opposite each other, go through them as well. Get the wire to the midpoint, push them up, and the same thing with the last one. Get it through the 2 loops that are opposite each other to the midpoint of the wire and push them up. And then I'm just going to fasten these in place by gently grabbing the knit here and holding on to all the lengths of wire and just twisting them together gently, because then we have a bit more of a solid piece here in the end that we can hold on to. And this is now ready for us to use a draw plate. And what's going to happen is it's going to make this knit thinner and longer. So the length that you make this full knit is not going to be the final length you can end up with, because it's going to get longer by pulling it through the draw plate. And just for reference, this length here is 11 centimeters. And then I'm taking my draw plate, and you just want to first of all find the hole that's about the same size as the knit that we have. You can see this one here goes through nice and easy, didn't really affect it. So this pretty much the size there is the large one in my case. I'm going to then take it one step down and then pull that through. Oh, it's a little bit tighter, but still easy enough to pull through. And what I like to do is just go through the same hole twice. So pull that through again, then I'm going to step down to the next hole, pull that through, again a little bit tighter. And then as we're doing this is gradually getting thinner and thinner. Step down again. And there's really no right or wrong to do this. You can stop at any point. It all depends on how you want yours to look. And obviously that will then also determine how long this is going to end up being. You can end up going down and making them really thin, as you can see these holes here, or you can stop before it gets that thin. That is completely your choice. So as you can see, going through that same one twice, stepping down again. So you just want to step down one size at a time, get that gradual size reduction. And if we look up close, the bridges between the loops have also gotten smaller, and the loops themselves have kind of gotten bigger. And this is also evening everything out. So if things weren't quite even size-wise or distance-wise, this will help even it out. So as I said, you didn't have to worry about it being too perfect. Just do the best you can. But otherwise, I'm going to bring it back to the draw plate here. So when I get this smaller still, and obviously the size that you want to get it to is determined by, for instance, what you want to use it for, or just how you want it to look. So keep going here, and then we can just have another look at it. And you can see again, it gives a really nice and uniform effect and has a lovely chain look. And it also has a nice movement to it, so it's not a stiff piece of jewelry or whatever you want to use it for. Now, just for reference, if I wanted to stop here, I can just show you the size difference. Remember before it was 11 centimeters long. This is now enlarged all the way till 19 centimeters. So there's quite a bit of an enlargement, and obviously you can keep going here. I quite like the way this looks, so I think I'm going to stop. But like I said, you can really get it very thin depending on your personal preference. Now, of course, you can use it as it is for a bracelet or a necklace. That looks absolutely lovely. Or you can use it for plenty of other designs. I'm going to have tutorials for other designs that incorporate Viking knit in the future on my channel. So if you don't want to miss them, make sure you're subscribed. Otherwise, this is how you make a basic Viking knit, and I will also have a tutorial where I show you how to make a double and a triple one. Link for that will be available when it's ready. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next one.